Welcome to One Bills Lite, your zero-calorie version of our daily show, One Bills Live, where we give you all the flavor without the weight gain. Coming up on today's episode, Steve and I take a deep dive into the Bills' 2021 regular season schedule. We talk with ESPN's resident Bills fan, Kevin Connors, for his takeaways on the Bills' slate and how many wins Buffalo can rack up. And we throw out some figures for 2021 and ask, would you believe it? Time to start your engines!
And it's Steve Tasker who has been all over the field.
Kind of unique. He was kind of a dual-role player for you. Steve! A balloon. Steve! A blimp? We're not even in the stratosphere of normalcy here. Thanks for joining us here on One Bills Lite. Steve, the Bills' 2021 regular season schedule is out, and it's a doozy. So much to digest. So first, give me your first impression of the Bills slate, the first thing you thought of when you looked at it.
Very different place from where I was a year ago. We had one of the most difficult schedules I could imagine last year. The NFC West was a very competitive schedule, a very competitive division. We were going to go out there, and the Bills actually absolutely plowed through that schedule last year, 13-3. They were a Hail Mary away from sweeping the NFC West. They swept their own division. And then you come back into this season, you look at the teams they have, the AFC South, not a juggernaut of a division, save the Indianapolis Colts. They play the Pittsburgh Steelers this season, who a lot of people think aren't as formidable as they were a year ago.
Yeah.
It's hard not to be optimistic, given what the Bills have added, the step forward we think Josh Allen could take, the addition of Emmanuel Sanders to the offense, the depth and competition at the defensive and offensive lines. Starlo Tulele back in the lineup. Ed Oliver getting into his third year, which is kind of a big step year for most players, like it was last year for Josh Allen. There's a lot to be optimistic about. 17-game schedule, a little bit wider margin of error for some teams to get back in it if they do falter, if they do come up with a key injury for a month or something like that. You just got to feel really good about where the Bills sit right now. And I think most of the analytics I've seen, too, and most of the analysts with just opinions, think the Bills are going to be at the top of the conference once again, and this schedule is a big reason why.
I will tell you the first thing that I noticed about the schedule, because I did have to take a deep dive into it for BuffaloBills.com, and the thing that struck me was 3 of their first 4 at home, 3 of their last 4 at home. They have never had a 16-game schedule or a 17-game schedule that has ever had 3 of their first 4 at home and 3 of their last 4 at home in the same season. That has never happened. And for a team that is this deep and this talented, you are basically handing them 2 opportunities to rack up a cluster of victories at the front and the back of their schedule. I think it leaves them with so much margin for error. Not that they want to take advantage of it, but you have a chance to start the season 4-0, and then if somebody's nipping at your heels at the end of the season, to put them in the rearview mirror.
At like no other time of the year, the TV people, you can kind of see their hands on the schedule. And I'll say this, and I've said it before on the show, they crave not only great matchups at the end of the season, but they also crave snow games. They also crave atmosphere for the broadcast. Buffalo can provide that in both respects. Crazy fans in a great season, sitting in a snowstorm, screaming, is great television. The Indianapolis Colts snow game from 4 years ago, a phenomenal example of that. There have been others along the lines as well. And you can bet that the TV people wanted to roll the dice and say, hey, give us a couple, and maybe an extra 2 games in Buffalo in January, particularly with the 18th week, getting deeper into January, we've got a chance to get that. I could see that happening. Plus, at the other end, they're saying when this team hits the field early in the season with this crowd and the way they played last year and the expectations, it's going to be absolute mayhem in Highmark Stadium. So the TV people want to gobble that up. So I'm more so than any time of the year, I'm kind of sensitive to that and what the TV people have to say about what they're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, all I'm going to say is the league has handed the Bills a long runway up to the Kansas City game in Week 5 to rack up 4 straight wins to go into that game 4-0 against Kansas City to play what is arguably one of their 2 toughest games on the schedule. Tampa's probably the 2nd toughest game, and I would argue that Indy is going to be the 3rd toughest game. I really think if Wentz comes through, that's going to be a difficult game. But here's the thing. One more thing about the front and the back end of the schedule, okay? You talk about weather, Steve. You've got 2 NFC South teams in late December and early January in Carolina and Atlanta. Atlanta plays all their home games in a dome and at least one road game in a dome every year in New Orleans.
And the other one's in Tampa.
Yeah, and the other one's in Tampa. So best of luck to those guys on January 2nd. Julio Jones won't even be able to feel his fingers. And then you think about record-wise the teams they're facing. You've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of those 8 games against teams under 500 last year, including 2 teams that won 4 games and 1 team that won 5 games last season. Now, I think a lot of people think Carolina's going to be a little bit better this year. The Jets may be incrementally better this year, and Atlanta should be a little bit better this year. But you hand a team that won 13 games last season this schedule on the front and the back end, you're inviting them to win their division and maybe even the top seed in the conference. I think that's how this schedule favors the Bills maybe more than anything else.
There's going to be some surprising teams. I don't think Pittsburgh's going to fall off a cliff, particularly opening day. I think they're going to come in healthy, fresh, and ready to go. And the Steelers game is going to be a challenge right off the bat. Although, you know you're going to get a boost from the crowd. Some of these guys 2 years in are never going to have seen that in Bills State, in Highmark Stadium. So all of that's going to go into the mix too. But, the Pittsburgh game's no pushover. But the division games, I mean, it's going to be a while before Buffalo fans don't shrug off the Miami Dolphins with that quarterback that they've got and the way their Bills quarterback, Josh Allen, has absolutely dominated that matchup. So all of that stuff rolled into one. Yeah, it's easy to be very optimistic about getting off to a good start in 2020.
Is there a part of the schedule that concerns you the most?
Well, yes. Around the bye week, you've got, you've got some 2 away games, Kansas City, then Tennessee. You got a home game against Miami after the bye, and then you go away and away again. That's a lot of away games with a bye week mixed in there. Yeah, that's a tough stretch, despite who the teams you're playing. Miami's going to be here at home, but Tennessee and Kansas City, that was a tough stretch last year. They reversed the order this year. That was the Tennessee game was the COVID game that got rescheduled, canceled, rescheduled, switched. And
Kansas City game got moved too.
That's right. So it was a tough – that was a 2-game losing streak. The only one they went through the entire season last year was the Tennessee, then Kansas City stretch last year. They get them back-to-back again this year. I anticipate a different outcome, but starting with those 2, with the Kansas City game, then away again at Tennessee, 2 night games. The schedule's going to be a little bit funky. Then you go on a bye week, you get a chance to refresh and play at home against Miami. But then you go on the road again to Jacksonville and the Jets. Now, certainly Jacksonville, the Jets, you don't expect them to be juggernauts, but Jacksonville's going to be a better football team, and so will the New York Jets. But at least by that time, you'll know what their quarterback's looking like.
Yeah.
So that's the stretch for me that does it. It's the 2 or 3 games on either side of the 2 games before the bye week and the 3 games after.
I know last year we looked at the schedule and said, this 5-game stretch is the gauntlet. I think this is the closest thing that approaches the gauntlet. Week 11 to week 14. You have Indy at home, who I think, if Wentz comes through, is going to be a very formidable team and the division favorite in the AFC South. Then you go to New Orleans on short rest to play a Saints team that should not be as good as they were the last several years, but is still always formidable in their own building down there at the Superdome. Then you come back, you do get a mini bye before you face New England, but New England always makes it tough. That's a Monday night affair here at home, and then back on the road, one less day of rest to go face the Super Bowl champs. That 4-game stretch, if you're not careful, could get really hairy really quick.
Indianapolis is going to be a good football team. New Orleans is going to be a good football team as well, depending on who their quarterback is. But even with Jameis Winston, they're going to be very dangerous. Taysom Hill, I don't know about.
He's a wild card.
He's a wild card. But they're a team that has been deep in the playoffs consistently with Sean Payton. So it's Indianapolis here, on the road in New Orleans, at home against New England. I mean, we all know New England is kind of – they're not going away.
Mac Jones is playing by that
That's
time
right.
of the year.
That's right. And then you've got at Tampa Bay. Yeah, that's a tough stretch. That's 4 games.
Yeah. Finally, what is a sneaky part of the schedule where you say that might be a more important game than we think? Maybe it doesn't look like it at first blush, but you say, you know what? That's a game that could prove to be pretty important.
I don't think there's any question. I think it's the last New England game in December 26th, where you are who you are. You're gonna know who everybody is. They're gonna know who you are. It's the day after Christmas, funky week of scheduling, trying to get on there and go out and maybe win a must-win game to win the division or ice the division, or if not, even more important. You've got to get back in the division race. You got to win 2 division games in the last 3 games to ice the division.
I looked at that game myself, but the game that caught my eye was the Carolina game the very week before that. If you look at the Carolina roster top to bottom, they've done a really good job of assembling talent there and filling a lot of holes. I don't think they have them all filled, but I think they did a good job in the draft again this year. They were, what's the word I'm looking for? They were good. They applied a good strategy to free agency in terms of who they kept and who they allowed to walk out the door. And I think that's a team that could sneak up on people in the NFC South this year. I don't think they're good enough to eclipse the Bucs, but I think they could be a team challenging for a wild card in that division and finish second in the NFC South, ahead of New Orleans and ahead of Atlanta. And by this point in the year, I think they could be rolling. And so I think that's a sneaky game that it's one of those watch-out games, I think.
Yeah, there's a chance that Sam Darnold goes to Carolina and does what I've said other people do, is flourish under a different coaching staff with a breath of fresh air, with some weapons and a team that is built around him that is not there for him to carry the load offensively, but to build him up and help him be a part of it. A much different mindset in Carolina than there was in New York. Much different pressure outside the lines than there was in New York. A coaching staff that has a reputation for being a little bit like the Buffalo staff, empowering and energizing.
Yeah.
Real leader in Matt Rule, like there is here in Sean McDermott and his crew. So there's a chance Sam Darnold all of a sudden goes, everybody's like, well, wow.
Yeah, it all comes together.
All comes together for him. He's been in the league long enough now, but he's young enough too. So, yes, by that time of the season, he'll have 3 months under his belt of live game action, let alone training camp and preseason. So, you're right. It does, for me, depend a little bit on how Sam plays throughout the season, but I could see that being a game that you're looking at going, man, this is going to be a tough one.
All right, time to play the numbers game, Steve. And this week's edition will challenge you on Bills' Week 1 opponents historically. This year, the Bills, as we know, opened the season against the Steelers. It is only the second time in team history that Buffalo has opened the season against Pittsburgh. The only other time was in 1978. So, Steve, I ask you, if you had to guess which team the Bills have faced the most in Week 1 in team history, which team would you pick?
For me, there's only one. The New York Football Jets.
Ding, ding, ding. You would be 100%
Every time
correct.
you think back to it, it's like, they were playing the Jets. Jim Kelly's first game as a Bill, the Jets.
Yeah.
Playing
A
all
lot
the
of
time.
jet openers.
A lot of jet openers.
A lot of jet openers. 13 in total. I actually thought it'd be more than that.
Right.
13 in total. The other 2 division teams are second and third, as you would
Sure.
anticipate. New England 9 times. Miami 8 times. Okay, so now, Steve, tell me the most popular non-division Week 1 opponent for the Bills all time.
Good question. I will.
Now, I'm gonna preface this by telling you there are 2 teams tied for this honor.
All right. Can I say, are they in the AFC?
They are both in the
Okay.
AFC. I will give you that.
I will say, given the history of this club and the old AFL days, I will say the Kansas City Chiefs or the Cleveland Browns.
You are 0 for 2 with those 2 guesses.
All right. I
Kansas
remember,
City has opened against the Bills 3 times in
Now, when I
Bills
say the
history.
Cleveland Browns, is it like the Baltimore Ravens were used to be the Cleveland
Brown,
Browns?
I left
Okay.
the Browns
All right.
as the Browns, and you're going to be fascinated to know this.
We've played the Baltimore Ravens more than the Browns.
The Browns have never opened against the
Really?
Buffalo Bills.
Wow, I could not have. So you're telling me
Never.
I could not have missed in a wider by
There are
wider
a lot of
margin?
teams that have never opened against
Okay.
the Bills. You'd be surprised. I mean, it's probably, let me see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 teams in the league have never opened against the Bills.
Houston Oilers / Tennessee Titans.
No. So Houston has only opened, well, Houston and Tennessee combined
Right.
3 times.
Really? Okay. I might have been on both of those, all 3 of those. I'm not gonna be. I'm not even gonna text. All right. How about this? The San Diego / LA Chargers.
LA Chargers is one of the 2 teams. 4 times they have opened against the Bills. So you have one other team that is tied with the Chargers, opened against the Bills 4 times in Bills history.
All right.
And
The
you know it's an
Cincinnati-
AFC team.
Cincinnati Bengals.
Cincinnati is an over team, Steve.
Really?
Never opened against the Cincinnati Bengals.
I stink. Hold on.
It's crazy that there's that many teams that have never opened against the Bills. You'd think the NFL would shuffle the deck a little bit more.
I wouldn't say that. The last team I would think would be the Denver Broncos. So I will say the Denver Broncos.
And you are correct. It is the Denver Broncos.
would
They
think
have
they'd
opened
never see
against the
that.
Bills 4 times,
Really?
along
Oh,
with the
wow.
Chargers. 4 times each for those 2 AFC West teams.
I'm horrible at this numbers game.
So finally, Steve, the last bit of pain for you. Can you guess the most popular NFC team to open the season against the Bills in team history?
Giants.
The Giants is not correct.
It bothers me that Tom Hollander has that buzzer and he knows the answers before you even tell him. Okay.
He is given the answers, so he knows
let's
when to nail you with that
say-
thing.
NFC team that has opened with the Bills more than any other. How many times?
Well, it's only 2 times that this has happened. So if you can recall a particular season opener against an NFC team, and you think it may have happened more than once, that
Washington.
It is not Washington. Washington has never opened against the Bills.
The LA Rams. The Rams.
Not the Rams. The
Really?
Rams have only done it once.
See, I was in
One
that game.
opener against the Rams.
Not that one. Not Cisco. I mean, not Seattle. We hardly ever played them. Let's say. Let's see. Oh, no.
I have to say, for
The-
people that are only listening to us, it is fascinating watching Steve's wheels
I will
turn in
say-
his brain and his
I will
eyes
say
pop out of his head.
The Detroit Lions.
It is not the Detroit Lions. Lions are a very popular preseason opponent, but they have never opened against the Lions in team history. You're in the right
Dallas?
You're in the right division, though.
Oh, really? With the Lions?
Yes.
Chicago.
It is not Chicago. Once against Chicago. Got 2 choices left.
Green Bay.
It is not Green Bay.
I am the worst.
They have never opened
I am the
against Green Bay.
worst.
They have-
Chicago then.
No, you already guessed
Oh, I'm sorry.
Chicago.
What is Minnesota? Okay. All right. Minnesota.
They have opened against Minnesota twice in their team history.
Absolutely
So
hate
that
the
was
Vikings. I hate
that was fun. That
We
was a
gotta-
good edition
Ah!
of the numbers game. Good job, Steve.
I suck.
Time now for our interview with ESPN anchor Kevin Connors as we discuss the Bills' 2021 schedule, how many wins are possible this season, and where the pitfalls might lie. Here's Kevin. We welcome in the ESPN anchor, who is probably one of the most ardent Bills fans up in Bristol, although Christine Lisi might give him a run for his money. I don't know. It's one Kevin Connors joining us on the line as we want to get his thoughts on the Bills draft, the Bills schedule, everything Bills so far this offseason. So, Kev, thanks for giving us some time. We understand you're in the midst of moving your parents, so good on you for being a dutiful son. Thanks for taking a break. Hopefully you got a cold drink in your hand while we give you about a 15, 20-minute break here.
You have no idea how welcome this break is. Can we do it for longer than 15 or 20 minutes?
Sure.
Yeah, we'll go ahead and hang up. You just sit there and talk to the phone. Give us your thoughts about the Bills draft, and we'll get into the schedule after that.
Steve, it's so funny. Everyone wants to get an immediate grade. And by the way, I tweeted this out before the draft. I can't get enough of the draft stuff. I can't get – you don't have to be a qualified individual. You don't have to have watched a down of football. If you make a mock draft, I'm interested. So I love all of it. I love all of the grades. How did we do? Who thinks how we did what? Here's the answer. I have no idea. What I love is that we didn't have a draft where we had to address multiple spots. It was nice to be able to say we've got to address the pass rush, but we can take some chances. Greg Russo, I'm a tape guy. I love being able to see what a guy has done on tape as opposed to the metrics of what he could be. Greg Russo has tape of a season where he had 19 and a half sacks at a Power 5 school. That's encouraging to me. He's a project. I don't think he's going to be a 3-down guy off the bat. He's probably a specialty pass rusher. So we took a chance, and if he works out, it's a home run. Boogie Basham appears to be, based on what everyone is saying, the more NFL-ready guy right now. Russo has the higher ceiling. Basham appears to be a guy who is more of an impact player off the bat. I spoke with Trevor Maddich, who spent, as both of you know, but Steve in particular, Trevor spent 10-plus years in the NFL. He's extremely high on Spencer Brown, loves his quote-unquote metrics, his athleticism, what he could be. The kid Tommy Doyle, to me, seems to be a young man who could contribute at some point. Here's the last thing I'll say. Based on what Brandon Beane has done to build this team into what it is, who am I to question anything that happened in the 7 rounds of that draft based on the success that he's had?
So I guess that kind of explains your tweet when you put out your official grades after the first 3 rounds of the draft. You gave the Bills an A+, every other team an F in the AFC East, and all the non-AFC East teams an F-.
I think that probably still holds true. I'm going to stick by that tweet.
Okay. Well, I hope it proves true. Quite frankly, Spencer Brown, Kevin, is an interesting guy from just because of the small school roots. Of course, how do you not eat up Middle America personified when he's in his garage, with a wooden spool table, 40 people, 40 of his closest friends and neighbors, and then the rest of the neighborhood ends up on his front lawn after he gets drafted. But we had Greg Cosell on a few weeks ago, a guy that does some work for you guys on the matchup show during the football season, and he called him the most athletic offensive tackle in the entire draft. That blew me away.
Well, I mean, again, I'm going to rely heavily on those guys who just consume that tape on a daily basis, and they can. Here's what I know about him. He was a very good basketball player in high school. And he's a guy who, 6'9", 310? I mean, so there's clearly, how do you possibly teach that? But here's the best part. And I think I made this comment on air. Some people go to college and gain the freshman 15. He gained 80 pounds in college, 80 pounds. So, he's clearly still just growing into his body. He's clearly still, I think, in a lot of ways learning the game of football. But I love the fact that he's not a guy who's been that size forever, that he's got athleticism. He's a skill position player in other sports. And now here he is in the NFL, and we're going to be able to mold him into an athletic tackle. And look, hopefully it works out. Both of you obviously know these are all difficult things to project at the next level. I just love that we didn't draft Spencer Brown because we needed him to play left tackle in week 1. We drafted him because we feel he could be something down the line, and we've got the opportunity to teach him. That, to me, it goes without saying, a great place to be as opposed to drafting from a position of we've got to get something immediately out of this guy.
So I've lived my life, as a former player. I got fans coming up to me, and they're very kind. It always happens. Hey, Steve, wow, you look good, like you're in good shape. You look like you could still play. For me, on my best day, I never looked like I could play. But I've seen the guys that the Bills drafted this year. I mean, they went big. And they went big. All these guys, they big and extra large. I mean, they are huge. I mean, it's two guys that are 6'8", all and 6'5". They're rookie free agent Cyrus Tuatele is also a 6'5" plus guy. I mean, they're signing big human beings. What do you think that says about either the kind of season the Bills had last year, or their philosophy going forward, or why do you think, if anything, why do you think that characteristic is all about this rookie class coming in, both undrafted and drafted? Size.
Well, it's a great point you make, Steve, and I love seeing some of the pictures of Russo in particular meeting with Brandon Beane and Greg McDermott, Sean McDermott for the first time. Greg McDermott's in my other life in college basketball. Sean McDermott, and he's just hulking over these guys. What does it say? I mean, clearly going defensive end, athletic pass rusher says there's a team in the AFC that we've got to figure out a way to beat. And someone did figure out a way to beat them, and that was by getting to the quarterback with athletic pass rushers. So there's the picture we're talking about right there. I mean, that looks like he's standing on a box, right? I mean, it's incredible how much bigger Greg Russo is than both Sean and Brandon. It's remarkable. The athletic pass rusher look. I mean, again, I'm not telling anything that you or our listeners don't know. It's that you've got to be able to not only get to the other team's quarterback, but protect ours. And Josh Allen is a great quarterback, but he's not a great quarterback if he's in a boot on the sideline. So it's getting these mountainous guys who can protect people who are trying to get our quarterback, and getting these mountainous guys who can go get your quarterback. So that's what it says to me. The first 4 picks for us.
Kevin, let's move on to the schedule here, which just came out on Wednesday, as you well know. And the number one thing that jumped out at me was, and I looked this up, this is the first time this has ever happened. 3 of the first 4 games for the Bills are at home, and 3 of the last 4 games for the Bills are at home. They have never had that on their schedule the same time in any of their previous seasons. To me, I think this is a tremendous advantage for a team that went 7-1 at home last year. I'm curious for your thoughts on that.
Chris, it's a great point. When I looked at the schedule, the very first thing that jumped out at me was sort of that. It was the 3 of the first 4 games at home. So you better be ready to go. Like, there's no easing into the season. You've got not only 3 of the first 4 games at home, all 3 of those games are winnable. You need to win. The other thing that jumped out at me is, and this comes with being a team that played in the conference championship game, look at the schedule right now. Is there a single home game that we're not going to be the favorite to win, that we're not going to be expected to win? But as we talked about last year, and before the season even happened, I said, look, this is where this team is. Let's embrace it. We are the hunted this year. We're not sneaking up on anybody. Now, there are some difficult road games, and Thanksgiving is going to be a ton of fun. We can talk about that. Obviously, you've got at Tampa Bay in December is going to be a challenge. 3 games in the state of Florida is going to be a lot of fun. But what jumps out to me right off the bat is you better win your home games early. You better be ready to start the season and winning these games. And then before you hit the bye week, man, you go to Cincinnati and to Tennessee. I mean, we're going to find out a lot about the Bills in the first 6 games of the season.
And then, to expand on your Saints game Thanksgiving night, we've had some fun with this here with Bills fans. We know what the biggest bar night of the year is, Kevin. It's the day before Thanksgiving, and you're going to drop Bills Mafia into the French Quarter, and they all know full well they don't have to show up for kickoff until 8:20 p.m. the next day. I mean, this could be the beer apocalypse in the French Quarter.
Of course, I see the dots you're connecting, and I like it. and you're encouraging me to get down to New Orleans for that, make a roadie down there, convince my wife we're having Cajun turkey.
Yeah, and you're not working
2021.
Friday.
That's right. Hey, listen, that to me, it's so good that we're nationally relevant again, because I think people on the national level are discovering what an amazing fan base that we have. And why it's taken us being nationally relevant again, I don't know. But invading other towns, as our fan base does, and going in there and in some ways eliminating home field advantage, it's amazing. And we all know what New Orleans is going to look like on Thanksgiving night. And thank goodness we won't have Drew Brees to contend with in that game. Not to say that New Orleans won't be a competitive team again this year. But, man, there are definitely some games on the schedule where you say, that's going to be a fun road trip. I'm going to try to get to the Tennessee game. I'm really going to try to get down to Nashville and check that out. That's one that I've got circled on the calendar right away.
Yeah, and I know that a lot of my friends were trying to get me to puke up the schedule early as if we had any idea what it was going to be, because they all wanted to pick the road games. And then the thing that was a squasher, they really had a dilemma as to, because last year was the perfect road trip season. It was San Francisco, Vegas, it was Denver, it was Tennessee, all of those, those road trips were on the thing, and nobody got to go to any of them. This year, they wanted to go to New Orleans, but they thought it was because Thanksgiving gave some people pause because it's a big family holiday. You don't really want to be gone for that. But Nashville is one that fans have had circled. I've said it before. I went to this 3 years ago when they were down there, when they won that game down there on a Sunday afternoon. I was a sideline reporter, and it was shocking the amount of Bills fans that showed up in Nashville.
There's at least 20,000, wouldn't you say?
I could not believe
I've
what
never seen it that
Old Town Nashville looked like the parking lot of, Highmark Stadium. So you got to get down there for that.
I got a buddy that lives in Nashville. He's already recruiting me. It's not going to take much arm twisting on my part. I can't promise that I won't have to twist my wife's arm. But that's one that is jumping out at me, believe me.
We would be remiss if we didn't thank you for participating in one of our recent polls that we did on our One Bills Live Twitter handle when last week we asked people to finish the sentence, Bills GM Brandon Beane is blank, and you participated. You went with the GM and leader the best fans in sports deserve. Did that just come to you naturally right off the cuff, with your on-camera improvisation abilities?
I'd love to tell you that it did, Chris. It was about an hour's worth of thinking. No, you know what? Honestly, yeah. You know what? He is. I don't know anyone that knows football that doesn't recognize the job that Brandon Beane has done. And you guys know as well as anybody, we played the game of general manager or team president roulette for a long time. And I remember when we first hired Brandon Beane and some of the moves that were made early on were not terribly popular with the fan base, getting rid of a lot of former high picks, notable, recognizable guys. And I just said, we've got to give this a chance. We've got to give anyone who's given the opportunity to be in that position a chance. And I'm so glad that this chance has given us the fruit that it has. I mean, he's done a remarkable job. Steve, you and I talked about this when I did the show last year. I mean, there was a time where we tried to get Antonio Brown, and that almost happened. And then it didn't. And then it's like, well, what are we going to do with that position? Well, you know what we did? We got a guy who's 10 times the player Antonio Brown is at this stage of his career, 10 times the presence that he is. The draft picks have been sensational. I couldn't be more pro Brandon Beane because of what the previous 20 years, and I'm not laying it on the general manager in every instance over the previous 20 years, but I know what we are right now. And I know that he is as responsible as anyone in the entire organization. So to me, when the draft comes around, hey, Kev, what do you think? Well, you know what? I'm trusting that guy because I've seen the results. Hey, what do you think about this free agent signing and the direction that we're going here? You know what? I'm trusting this dude because he's built us into arguably the best team in the AFC, potentially in the NFL. So I am pro Brandon Beane 100%.
So the Bills sweep the AFC East last year. Which team over the course of free agency and the draft closed the gap to the narrowest margin?
Yeah, I think the easy answer is New England, and I'm not saying it's not the right answer. I really like what the Dolphins are doing. I really like that coach. I really like the picks that they've made. Steve, obviously, it all comes down to whether or not Tua is the quarterback that they thought he was coming into the NFL. But they've got a lot of pieces there. So for me, listen, New England made the big splashes in free agency, and what are they going to start, like 12 tight ends offensively? So, I mean, we know about a lot of the names they have there, and we know – here's the other thing that I get a kick out of. They draft a quarterback who has some of the same characteristics as Tom Brady, so now all of a sudden they have the next Tom Brady. And Mac Jones could turn out to be a really good quarterback, but let's pump the brakes for crying out loud that they got the next Tom Brady. You know what I mean? Yeah. But so maybe Mac Jones is the guy at some point this year or in the future that leads them back to division success, division championships. But for me, Miami is the team short term that I think is the bigger challenge to the Bills than anyone next year.
Is there some sort of mindset in New England, even after Tom Brady left and won a Super Bowl with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, that Tom Brady was a product of being developed by the coaching staff and the culture in New England rather than Tom Brady carrying the culture and the success they had in New England? Do you think how much credit do you give the New England Patriots for the success of their team with Tom Brady, and how much do you give to Tom Brady? I mean, it's a great question still, but do they get enough credit so that you can say, yeah, they probably can do the same thing with Mac Jones? They certainly did not do it with Jarrett Stidham or Brian Hoyer or even Jimmy Garoppolo. So how much credit do you give them?
Look, as is the case anytime you have that sort of success and you've got an all-time legendary, maybe the best coach of all time, and an all-time legendary, maybe the best quarterback of all time, you've got to be able to say they work together. Both of them, the Patriots helped Tom Brady. Tom Brady significantly helped the Patriots. To say that Tom Brady is who he is because of Bill Belichick in New England, to me, is totally wrong. And to say that they will be able to, because Tom Brady had the success in New England that he had, they can do that with anyone, Steve, as you just pointed out, is totally wrong as well. I think it was a perfect marriage. Look, Brady just won a Super Bowl without New England last year, totally new team. He was surrounded. They did a phenomenal job of surrounding him with tons of great pieces. I think it can be both possible that Tom Brady is the best quarterback of all time, and Bill Belichick is a genius, probably the best coach of all time, but that both potentially could have happened on their own without the other. Because they were together, it took them even to the next level. But I can't attribute much of or a lot of Tom Brady's success solely to New England. It helped. But Tom Brady would have been, in my opinion, Tom Brady would have been a great quarterback, probably, Steve, on about 27 other teams. There might have been two teams in the league that wouldn't have been able to surround him to be the quarterback that he turned into. But Tom Brady's making everyone around him better. And if you give him anything to work with, Tom Brady's still having that phenomenal success.
So, Kevin, Steve and I were having fun with this the other day after poring over the schedule. We went floor and ceiling for Bills' victories with this schedule this season. So give us your floor for victories and your ceiling.
Well, Chris, you realize that it's an annual rite of passage for me to tweet out that the Bills will go undefeated every single season.
Okay.
So
I think we know one of the answers.
Exactly, yes. My ceiling is 20. Floor, look, again, I mean, did things go our way last year? There's no question. But are you sometimes responsible for your own luck? Like, I believe that. So, what's the floor? This is a double-digit win team, okay? So with a 17-game schedule, 10-7, that's probably the floor for this team. obviously barring injury. If everyone's healthy, particularly the quarterback, number 17, this is bare minimum a double-digit win team. Now, what's the legitimate ceiling for this team in terms of wins? That's tough to put a number on. The NFL is everyone does this. Everyone looks at the schedule and says, okay, week 1, that's a win. No, we're losing that game. And as you guys both know, free agency and training camp and injuries happen. And then all of a sudden, this team that was an automatic win is not anymore. And this team that's a definite loss is not anymore.
Right.
I'll say this. The expectation better be winning a Super Bowl this year, because that's where this team is. So so you want a ceiling? That's the ceiling.
Yeah. Steve and I got to 14 wins pretty easy in a 17-game schedule. There's some toughies on there, and maybe they have a clunker like they did in Tennessee last year, 1 week. But 14 seems pretty attainable. Kevin, before we let you go, there is a particular Throwback Thursday tweet of yours that I have to take issue with. Number one, being a fellow Long Island native and a guy with a soccer background, the footwear for this particular photo of you, you go with the Converse. What are these? The Pro Stars? What do we got there? What are we rocking in this photo? First of all, how old are you here? Like 7 or 8?
5.
5.
Oh, you're like,
man, you've always been tall. But yeah, like you. I mean,
I wasn't that tall when I was 15.
But yeah, I gotta ask, Mom, where are the cleats? I mean, the grass field's right behind you. Give the kid a chance.
Listen, you know what? Steve could attest to this. This is the days where footwear, to the level of which we know it now, is in its infancy. All right, so we're going to give Mom and Dad a little bit of a break. This is pre-Converse weaponsy. Look, I'm just lucky they're not Keds or something to that level.
Nike,
that would have been rough.
Name brand.
Yeah, Nike was still Nike back then. I mean, we didn't know. I mean, we called it Nike. Well, like, it can't be that simple, right?
Yeah.
And we didn't even know what that was. But you're right.
That's a great shot, though. That's
a great
awesome.
one.
You got your name on the ball written like in giant marker. I mean, that is just, if that doesn't scream our youth, I don't know what does. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Kevin, we thank you for the time. Your mom just texted me. She said she's got the dining room chairs in the driveway, so you got to get back to work. Thanks for the time. We appreciate it. We'll catch up with you soon.
Thanks, Kevin.
I'm dressing up next time, guys, I promise. But thanks. It's always great to talk with you. Go Bills.
We close up this week's episode with our exercise called Would You Believe It? First up, total wins for the Bills in the 2021 regular season, 14, Steve. Would you believe it?
Yeah, that's what I got. When I went through this, I got them at like 14-3, 13-4. And I could drop as low as 12-5. But, yeah, I could believe it. If they stay healthy and play the football that they've been playing over the last 18 months, they're a hard team to beat.
Yeah.
They're rarely at the center of a bad performance. And that's a lot of times that gives you the extra couple of wins that you might need.
Every year is different, as Coach McDermott says himself all the time. But I think the floor is 12.
Yeah,
the floor is 12.
Yeah.
And then, it's probably, maybe you have a bad week like they had against the Titans last year, and you maybe have one loss that you didn't think you were going to have, and so you're 13-4 instead of 14-3. But I could believe 14-3. You wouldn't have to twist my arm to get there.
Yeah, you got to throw out games like say Kansas City, we'll say Tampa Bay, the world champions, the two teams in the Super Bowl, and then you get down. It's like okay,
New Orleans, maybe
New
Indy,
Orleans, and maybe you split with New England. Maybe New England catches lightning in a bottle. Maybe Mac Jones is running that offense the way they run it. And they find New England finds ways to win games. They split with New England. There's 3. Okay, then what? You're looking at New Orleans, maybe Indianapolis with Carson Wentz.
Yeah.
Okay? There's 4. You're 13-4 right there.
I think that's good enough to win the division.
Yeah, and then too, I mean, maybe Pittsburgh's better than you think at the beginning of the season. They were that way last year. Won 11 games before the wheels came off.
Yeah.
So you're still 12-5. Goodness gracious.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
It's a pretty good season. So there's your floor.
Next, 50 total touchdowns for Josh Allen. Would you believe it?
I would believe it. I've already called the 5,000-yard mark for
Yes,
him.
you did, and there is an extra game, which
17
we should
games.
mention.
It'll depend,
Whether
too.
he'll play in that remains to be seen.
Right, and we've seen that the last couple of years where that game is either meaningless because you can't improve yourself, or it's meaningless because you don't want the guys to get hurt, and you're in the playoffs, and there's only one bye. Yeah.
But
yes,
yeah,
I could
think
see
he had
that.
46 touchdowns last year,
could see that.
counting his receiving touchdown and rushing touchdowns.
Gabe Davis had 3 drops. Tywan Jones had a drop. Dawson Knox had a drop. These are all touchdown drops.
Yeah.
Now, a couple of them, they got a touchdown anyway, but not all of them. And
he missed John Brown in week 1.
he missed John Brown in week 1, missed Dawson Knox in week 4, 3, something like that. Yeah. Yes,
I would
can
believe it. I would believe it, especially with the extra game.
I think that's where you got to put. I think that's where you put the crosshairs right now.
Oh, you think that's the over/under?
I
Is that
think
what you're
that's where
saying?
you put the crosshairs, yeah.
Woo!
If I had to, that's the only number that would like going. Yeah, he could get it, and I would feel not confident either side of that.
Yeah.
So yeah, that because it's a round number, and we know how difficult it is to get there, but we also know it's a throwing league, and the Bills are going to go 4 wide again.
Maybe 5.
Right? Yeah.
Maybe. 10 combined sacks for Greg Rousseau and Boogie Basham. Would you believe it? This is trickier.
I can put it. I can construe that in my mind for sure. But I would say no. I'm saying that's a big ask.
It's obviously predicated on their amount of playing time.
Right.
I think we can both agree that A.J. Epinesa is going to get more playing time than either one of them.
At least to begin with.
And
So
you still have,
Mario
at least right
Addison.
now, Mario Addison and Jerry Hughes on the roster. So those guys are going to have to be very opportunistic with a very limited number of opportunities. But I will say this. They're not going to be the guys getting the double teams.
And
It's
Rousseau's
going to be Mario
yeah.
Addison. It's going to be Jerry Hughes getting the doubles.
They're going to have to earn it.
And the opponent's going to say, well, prove to us you can beat one-on-ones.
That's right. But they're also going to be in there for a chance to actually get a shot at rushing the passer.
Well, we have heard them say that both of those players are capable of reducing down inside in obvious
yeah.
passing situations. So even if you have Addison and Hughes on the edges, it doesn't necessarily mean that Basham and or Rousseau are off the field. One of those two could be on the field for opportunities.
And we also know this, how the season starts, that there's a 100% chance that that's not how it's going to end.
Well, look at how much the rotation changed over the
that
course of the year
rotation,
last year.
It changed so vastly over the course of the season. So we'll see. But they're going to get some chances. They'll earn it. But 10 sacks between the two of them, it's a big ask.
Yeah. Finally, 1,000 receiving yards for Gabriel Davis. Would you believe it?
No.
No.
No. Not with Diggs, Beasley, and Emmanuel Sanders.
So
on
are
the
you
roster.
saying that because you don't think he's going to get enough opportunities?
Right. I don't think he'll have enough catches. I don't think he'll get enough catches.
35 receptions last year for about 500 yards.
Even if he gets 50 catches this year, if that group, 50 catches, he'll get, he may get 750 or 800, but 1,000 yards?
I think he's going to be running a lot of deep routes. He's going to be running a lot of deep stuff. He catches those other 3 touchdowns from last year. He's got probably 700 yards on 38 receptions. I mean, think about that for a second. Now, I'm not saying that, every year is different. I think it's a lofty ask. I think he's probably closer to 800 yards receiving.
That's a long way.
But I think that kid's going to start as the Z receiver in this offense. And you're going to have Sanders and Beasley going double slot.
There is going to be 17 games. There's a little boost on the end of it.
Mm-hmm. And he'll be playing all the way through as a younger player.
Yeah, he'll play. No, I still don't see it. There's just too many
I tried.
Options. There's too many options.
I twisted the arm a little bit.
There's
didn't
too
get
many
it.
options. It's too long of a season. And, So
Fun to think about, though,
it
for
is.
sure.
And he's not going to be the number one option on this offense.
Right. But again, much like those young pass rushers, figures to see a lot of one-on-one coverage.
Absolutely.
Because they're going to be doubling the other guys, and they can't double everybody. So could it happen? Maybe.
Sure.
Maybe. All right, that'll do it for this episode of One Bills Lite. Please subscribe so you know when the next episode drops. And remember, when there isn't enough time for One Bills Live, there's always enough time for One Bills Lite. For Steve Tasker, I'm Chris Brown. We'll catch you next week, everybody.